Okay, honestly, I don't have an intro this time. I just watched the Justice League vs. Fatal 5 thing, and I'm freaking out about it internally, so I don't want to go back in and write an intro. This video has nothing to do with that, unless you count the fact that that movie looks like it's using time travel. Anyway, play the intro music.
Because it's Thursday.
Hello, Watchtower Database, and welcome back to the Vanishing Point, your bi-weekly source for making cartoons much more complicated than they need to be. Speaking of complications, I'm not sure if you guys have ever noticed, but time travel stories are kind of hard to write. You've got to be able to follow multiple different characters on multiple different timelines and not get any of the continuity goofed up. Honestly, it can be a lot to keep track of. Bruce Timm even said something along these lines himself when recording commentary for the second part of Justice League Season 1 finale, The Savage Time.
And, we love time travel stories, but at the same time we hate them because they're really hard to plot without creating all kinds of paradoxes. And we didn't do too bad in this one. There's a couple glaring holes, but not too bad.
So my goal today was to comb over that three-part epic and try to pinpoint just what those paradoxes were and see if maybe we could try to explain them with the rules that the DCAU has laid out regarding time travel. First of all, I think the biggest paradox that we see is the reveal at the end of part 3, where we've come to find out that this all occurred on a fixed timeline. If you haven't heard of this term before, essentially it's the kind of time travel that we see in Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, in which the actions of the time traveler just become history of the world that we're in. In that movie or book, Harry sees what he thinks is his father casting a Patronus spell to save himself and Sirius Black from a bunch of Dementors. But later on in the story, we come to find out that that was actually a time-traveling Harry saving himself from those events. We're clued into this revelation by the fact that the DCAU's continuity seems to have stayed intact despite the Justice League's meddling around in the past. This is how both Vandal Savage and Steve Trevor were able to recognize Wonder Woman after she returned to the present day, and is further cemented by all of the continuity nods that we get later on in Justice League and Justice League Unlimited. As far as the DCAU timeline is concerned, Vandal Savage always set himself up to take over in World War II. The Justice League always ended up back in the past to stop him, and about 60 years later, he always sends a laptop back to himself to try to stop that from happening. On its own, this concept isn't a huge deal. We seem to have got a hint to it earlier on in Superman the Animated Series when Lois Lane name drops Wonder Woman before she even left the Isle of Themyscira.
Yeah, right. I'm Wonder Woman.
In fact, we've actually done a video on that before. You can check it out by clicking this card up here. I'm sure since it came out earlier in the channel's history, a lot of you guys who have subscribed since then haven't seen it, so I suggest giving that one some love. It's really underappreciated. Back on topic though, this time loop kind of explains the mismatched technology that we've seen all throughout the DCAU, going all the way back to Batman the Animated Series.
Transistors? They weren't invented until after the war.
Sure, GL, that may be the case, but we all know transistors were reverse engineered from technology sent back from the future that never could have existed had transistors not been reverse engineered from technology sent back from the future. Checkmate, atheists. You see what I mean though? This stuff just gets more confusing and convoluted the more you look at it.
If you think about these things too much, your head will explode.
Good! Let's make my head explode. I'm sure it'll boost the views. Like I was saying, this self-sustaining time loop isn't really much of a problem in and of itself, but it becomes problematic when you start mixing it with the other type of time travel. Other than a fixed or static timeline, the other main type of time travel that is used in fiction is called a dynamic timeline. Now, this is the type of time travel, kind of like in Back to the Future or Butterfly Effect, where the protagonist goes back to the past, changes a thing, and as a result, the present that they come back to is much different than what they had been accustomed to. In the context of these episodes, this would apply to the timeline in which Savage won World War II, and Batman is leading a modern-day resistance as a result. Since we've already established that the Justice League always goes back to World War II and always stops Savage, this timeline shouldn't even exist. And yet, in the context of this story, if this timeline doesn't exist, then the Justice League doesn't have the ability to go back in time and stop Vandal Savage from winning World War II. Complicating the issue even further, it seems Vandal was also under the impression that this new timeline was a fixed timeline. After all, we're shown that he built a time machine in that version of the present as well to try to send himself back the laptop and ensure his victory again.
They used it as a tunnel into the past.
And altered history to change the outcome of the war.
Which means it's very likely that the Vandal Savage of 1944 actually received 2 laptops from his future self. One from the side where he won the war and one from the side where he lost the war. So with all of these paradoxes in play, is there any way that we can kind of make sense of it all? Well, I think so. So long as we can accept that time travel isn't the only thing that's in play here. I mean, obviously, when the Justice League went back to World War II, that was time travel. But when they were taken into the alternate timeline, that wasn't. From what we're shown in the episode, it seems like the Justice League members were able to cross over into this new timeline because they were shielded by Green Lantern's ring.
Perhaps the aura from Green Lantern's ring protected us.
But that's not how time travel typically works. Think of it like this. In most fiction, the time stream is like a pond. If you throw a rock into it, the water will start rippling from the spot where the rock landed. With this in mind, that means history would start changing from the point in time where the first change was made, and not from when the time machine was booted up. So if we think of Savage's laptop as a rock in a pond, then the ripple of change should affect every Green Lantern from the earliest point after the change started. Following that train of logic, John Stewart shouldn't have been sucked into the new timeline in what we see as the present time, but from the first time he ever put on his ring. So at this point, you might be asking yourself, if the ring's aura wasn't what was protecting the League from the ripple of time, then what was actually going on? Well, rather than the Savage time being an alternate timeline, I think it's an alternate universe. I'll concede that mostly this is in cartoon physics, and so there could be a million explanations for what actually happened on screen, but based on what we've just concluded isn't happening when we see the League members switch timelines, it seems like the move to the alternate universe was the result of the energy field of the Lantern Ring being interfered with by the energy field given off by the time machine. This is why the League is at the same place at the same time period rather than an earlier version of Green Lantern being affected by the time ripple. In short, rather than the Lantern Ring by itself being able to protect the League from the ripple of time, it seems like the whole thing was just a fluke based on energy interference. In fact, this hypothesis is backed up when Batman and Superman are talking about the time machine's ability to disrupt other devices.
Have you detected any large electrical or magnetic disturbances recently?
We experienced some interference on our comm links.
And if we take into consideration how Tom Turbine explains the multiverse,
as an expert in nuclear physics, I have long hypothesized that there are an infinite number of parallel dimensions, each containing its own planet Earth. Each Earth occupies the same location in space, but vibrates at a different speed.
It makes sense that the Protected League members would be in the same time and space, just in the different world, as the energy interference would have essentially just knocked them into vibrating at a different speed. And I hear you asking, but if everything we see in the Savage time is an alternate universe, then how did the League get back to the present day of the main universe? And how would a 1940s alternate universe version of Steve Trevor know who Wonder Woman was in the early 2000s of the DCAU continuity? Good questions. I'll let Owlman explain.
With every choice we make, we literally create a world. History branches in two, creating one Earth, where we made the choice, and a second, where we didn't. That's the secret of the universe, you know. Billions of people making billions of choices, creating infinite Earths. Some so similar to each other you could spend a lifetime searching for any distinction. Others so radically different, they defy comprehension.
And all of the branches originate here.
Every version of reality balances precariously on this singular Earth.
So essentially in the DC mythos, each branch of the multiverse has a piece of shared history and all takes root in some sort of Earth Prime. I know that Crisis on Two Earths isn't DCAU canon, that's actually a subject we've covered before in the past, but this concept has actually been part of the DCAU mythos for a while. Remember Brave New Metropolis?
You were working on that inner gang piece. They put a bomb in your car. Remember?
Sure, but Superman saved me.
He didn't save you. He got there a split second too late.
Much like how that universe didn't cease to exist just because our Superman did save Lois Lane, the DCAU proper didn't just cease to exist just because Vandal Savage won World War II.
I should have known you'd be here. The instruments in the Watchtower picked up this anomaly a few hours ago.
Sadly, this also means that Jean was wrong when he told Batman that he would cease to exist, and that alternate universe version of himself is still out there leading the resistance against Savage.
If this doesn't work, someone's got to stay here and fight.
By this point, I'm sure a lot of you are probably wondering, well then when exactly did this new universe break off and start vibrating at a different speed? Honestly, this point isn't entirely clear, but my assumption is it has something to do with the two laptops. After all, the one that we do see Vandal Savage have doesn't sound like it was sent back by a winner.
World War II was the last, best opportunity for me to assume full and permanent power.
But then again, at the same time, Jean does tell us,
whoever left from our time could have gotten here months ago, perhaps years.
And one would assume that the point of divergence would be something that occurs concurrently with the League's presence in the past, or else their whole time traveling thing would have been another universe hop within itself. I suppose at the end of the day, maybe their arrival is the actual divergence point. But who knows? Maybe I'm wrong about everything. After all, even though our Batman didn't vanish, Vandal Savage sure did when Superman used a similar time machine to fix the past and hereafter. So then, did the Savage time Batman actually end up vanishing as well? I feel like this time travel thing's gonna be a whole ordeal. That all being said, my question of the day for you guys is, what is your opinion? Does it make more sense that the Savage time is just a messed up timeline? Or does it deserve a branch on the multiverse tree whenever we end up doing part 2 of this video here? As always, leave your answers down under in the Australia box. Of course, before I go, I want to thank all these lovely people who have helped support us on Patreon this month. If you want to see your name on the list by the next Vanishing Point, be sure to head on over to patreon.com/DCAU Watchtower and we'll get it on there for a pledge as low as $1. While you're over there, you can check out other perks that we're offering, like voting in polls for our upcoming videos, live stream hangouts, custom artwork, and more. Speaking of hangouts, we've also recently started a Discord server. It's been a lot of fun kind of keeping up with the community there and getting to talk nerdy with all of you guys. You can check that out by clicking the link that James is going to leave in the description. As always, I've been Matty Washburn, this has been The Vanishing Point, and we'll continue to stay those things so long as you continue to stay you. Love you guys. I'll see you in 2 weeks.